Lori Lizarraga, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, both of you, Enrique and Matt, for inviting me on. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, you're
Well,
welcome.
you have been through a bit of an adventure here. Let's start first with your background. You're joining us from your hometown of Dallas, Texas, right now.
That's right.
Yeah, and so your first job, tell us about that. Where was that at?
My first job in the industry, Bakersfield, California. A lot of people who I went to school with and who I knew from, California, LA, San Diego, wherever else. Every time I would say, I'm moving to Bakersfield, you know, I got a lot of questions, concerns, if I would be okay. Do I need anywhere to stay on the weekends? But I loved my first market of Bakersfield. I want to say at the time it was something like Market 127, pretty small. Loved the support of that station, loved how much free reign we got. It really was like a grad school program in that, it taught me all the things that you just have to learn on the job, all the crazy experiences of breaking news and, working really hard on stories and breaking enterprise type of feature stories, as well as, hard news stories. It was so fun. I got thrown on a weather wall to do weather on the weekends that I had never done weather before and I was totally unprepared for it. But yeah, I mean, it really was a great first experience in the industry. And it's where I started learning how to become a real journalist and realize what impact our roles can have in community.
Small market, and where you really are asked to do just about everything. Did you have to shoot and edit as well?
Oh, shot, edit. I was producing my own show at the 11 o'clock on the weekends. I was anchoring. I was doing the weather. Everything.
Yeah. So when did you get the call for the possibility that you could go to KUSA in Denver, one of the big stations in the country? That's going to a big time after someone that's been in Bakersfield.
Yeah, were you recruited or did you apply?
A little bit of both. I had so much success in my first market of creating a reel, putting it up online on YouTube, on Vimeo, and, all these different sites, and letting sort of the work speak for itself. And so I did that again as I was approaching my 2-year contract in Bakersfield, and did the same thing. And from there, it's sort of like, an active business card, got some engagement with that from news directors across the country. And in the 6 months leading up to the end of my contract, I also was being pretty assertive in that I was visiting some places that I thought could potentially be a good fit. Some stations in Dallas, some stations in Nashville, Seattle. And in that, just poking my head in places and saying, I'm coming up on a contract. I'm good at this job. I'm willing to work hard and learn. And I was reached out to by KUSA recruiter, I believe, who had some opportunities at a number of stations, including KUSA in Denver. And from there, I just started having conversations with lots of different stations and narrowed it down. I believe I visited 3 in person before, making a decision to head to Denver. In Dallas, in Denver, and in Seattle were my final 3 options. So I was making a good jump wherever I was going to head to, which was really fortunate.
Where in Seattle? What station were you looking at here?
Oh, what was it? Como?
Yeah. The ABC,
Yeah.
ABC station.
Enrique's station.
That former station. Yeah, one of my former stations. Yeah, I actually started my career in Seattle as a radio guy there. So you get this opportunity to go to a, sizable station. KUSA
Absolutely.
has a heck of a reputation.
Yeah.
What were you feeling? Because as someone who, I actually started my career at Como, which going out of college and going there was a big thing. And,
Amazing.
it was definitely a cultural adjustment.
Absolutely. I mean, I was so excited. I had fear when I left college and actually got into the industry that I, may not have the chops for it. I was under the impression that the industry really does weed us out if we're actually willing to do this job and do it well. It's hard work. And I was really grateful to see that after the 2 years that I put in Bakersfield, I truly, no matter how hard the work was and how much it was, that I loved being a journalist. And I was excited to go to a station like KUSA, which this still stands true, is a station that has so much to teach, young journalists about how to be effective in our communities, to do good work, to hold people accountable, and to just do quality photography, all of it. I was really excited to learn from some of the industry's best, which again, still totally stands true.
As a Latina, did you go in there thinking that, okay, part of this is being a diversity hire as well?
Yeah, I definitely knew that was working in my favor. Let's say that, Enrique. I went for my in-person interview, and there was a point where I looked around newsroom as we were walking through, and I did say, yeah, this is a really white newsroom. I think I may get the job. I mean, I really did think that. At the time, though, I did not think that was a bad thing. And I still don't think that was a bad thing necessarily. It's just coming from an experience where I had a lot of support and where the Latino community was really prevalent in, Bakersfield, California, farming community, a very diverse community. We had a Telemundo station in-house where I would turn my packages in both Spanish and English at times, or would get stories based on the fact that I spoke Spanish. I mean, all of it came up as things that I really needed to do the job well in that community. So I thought that would really serve me in this new newsroom, I guess, being a young journalist and having had a great experience. I didn't really know fully what questions to ask or how to ensure that I was going to get that support in telling the stories I wanted to tell, because I hadn't really had an experience yet where I needed to get that written in a contract or have that discussion.
So what is the demographics of Denver vis-a-vis the Latino community? Is it the most dominant minority community, or is it?
By far.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. In Denver proper, I want to say that it's even higher, but in terms of Colorado, it's something like 25% of the population is Latino Hispanic. I want to say something like 8% is Black, and it's 67% is white. And I may be a little off on those, but we looked at a bunch of them during COVID to see what communities were coming up with the most cases of COVID. So those stats around the population are in my head a bit. So I think that's roughly right.
Well, being bilingual too, I mean, that's a plus to have, in the reporting business, especially these days, and especially someone that can speak Spanish, I think is a real positive. So to me, that would be a good thing, a very good thing.
So you're at the station and you're working. How did things progress? Did you get the support you needed? Because, both Enrique and I know what it's like to be thrown into a white world where you have no mentors, you have no support. So what was it like at KUSA for you?
It was sort of getting thrown into the deep end, but I think that's sort of how it is in any, station when you're first starting, like sink or swim. And, we swim. But I did notice that I didn't have right away someone to take me under their wing. And in my first station, like I said, had Telemundo. And there were instant connections that I felt I had, and people who could introduce me to, you need to know this person, you need to know that person, sources, and, just relationships that had already been built that I was able to sort of walk into and become another source for them within the newsroom. I really was at the mercy of asking, do you guys know this person? Or Googling if there was like a person we could talk to in Denver who could be an expert on the stories I wanted to cover. There wasn't pushback about the stuff that I was pitching right off the bat. There just was a certain way that the stories could be reported on, that was sort of framed in the way of fairness or objectivity that while I felt super fair and objective in my last market, had not really had those bumpers put on me. So I realized I was sort of storytelling and putting personality and personal experience into all of the reporting that I did. And I thought that really added a level of expertise. I was being asked to really remove myself in a much larger way from the stories about my community. And it was new to me. And I think it was new to them, what I was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Editorially, the people in the newsroom that were the managers that you were dealing with, were they all white?
Yes.
Okay. And when you're you're coming into a newsroom like that, being a very young reporter. In As you were starting this journey, did you talk to them at all about uh, what you might need in a sense of coaching and understanding the market and being able to have the opportunity to succeed? Or did they say to you, we want you to succeed? Or was it more like, nah, just go to it?
I do think that there was conversation about, wanting to have their young reporters succeed and seeing sort of the fire in me and seeing that I wanted to do well here and I wanted to dive into the deep end. Um, but it's an intimidating place to start in a big, as you say, well-known, reputable station like that, and to know that there are so many people who are better at the job, who have been here longer, who know the market better, and who in general have been doing journalism in some cases as long as I have been alive. It's difficult to challenge that, especially being so new and being so young. So I think there was sort of a level of, yes, we definitely want you to succeed, but there are also some rules that we play by, and there's some time that you need to put in. And I think I could have afforded to wait my turn on some things, but I just felt impatient for changes that I felt were overdue. And some of those changes I felt needed to be made quickly because I couldn't do the right reporting, the fair reporting that I wanted to do without those changes.
Well, it's interesting. At stations that consider themselves powerhouse stations, right? The news directors of those stations generally are a certain breed, and they don't look at themselves as being racist or conservative. They look at themselves as being ultimately fair, but in sort of a white guy dominant, just dominant culture way, that I'm not racist, but I'm going to tell you how to cover your people, which is ludicrous, but that is sort of the mindset that people don't understand that is pervasive in high-powered newsrooms.
It's remarkable to me, right, that you could think that you are an expert on everything. Your
Exactly.
lived experience, my lived experience, my community, your community, his community, their community. It's an impossibility to be an expert.
But that is the mindset, right?
But it truly is. And I guess we've just been letting that get along that way for far too long. But a great example, and I wrote about this in the piece that I ultimately put out at the end of my contract in Denver. The very first example happened within 2 weeks at the station, and it was about the way that we were supposed to characterize and discuss, talk about, label undocumented immigrants, and using the term illegal. And that very first example, I remember telling my dad after it happened that I had gotten into sort of a loud conversation about, I would not say illegal, the person's here illegally, this person is in the country, illegally. I wouldn't say it, I wouldn't track it, you would never hear my voice, say something like that. And I just remember my dad saying, are you trying to get fired? Like, it's so early. It's so early in the contract. You can't even just try to get along a little. But as I said, I felt that these were things that were surprising.
Actually, I found that very surprising because using illegal this was probably 18,
19.
Okay. That to me was something that was not being done unless you were kind of a Fox person. And
AP Style had already changed its guidance back in something like 2013. This was already an industry standard, and especially coming from someone who was telling you, this is my lived experience. My mom was, just got her citizenship when I was a junior in high school. Same with my grandma. I have family who is going through the process of getting status in this country. I am telling you, the way I would never refer to my family is the way I would never refer to anyone in this community. And I'm telling you that. And we could not see eye to eye. And there was a point where my manager said, things, we separated. I went back to my desk. The story was not going to run that day. We needed to discuss this more. And in trying to make peace, the manager who was telling me these guidelines at 9 News came to me and said, who you really need to talk to is one of our white anchors. He is just a grammar guru, and he will be able to explain why we keep this rule and why it's actually more respectful, more PC to say, I'm
What
probably
does that have
explaining
to
it
do with
wrong.
grammar? What does that have to do with grammar?
You
I
could
mean,
see that we were speaking totally different languages. It was a really good example of like, I'm not confused about the grammar, and you're not confused about what I'm saying either. We just don't want to agree with each other that this is going to happen my way. You're certain that you have it right, and I'm telling you have it wrong. Nothing you can say is going to work, and nothing I can say is going to work. We were just sort of at an impasse.
so uh, did you reach out at all to try to connect with older reporters or veteran reporters there to be mentors?
You know, I had mentors, but not anyone who looked like me or certainly would have been up against some of the battles that I was picking. I also didn't really have anyone really to choose from in terms of having someone who was from the Latino community who could say like, come here, been there, done that. Let me tell you how it's about to happen for you. There wasn't an older, more tenured Latino to ask for help from, but there were other people of color, and we did certainly band together in terms of feeling these ways. It was definitely a shared experience among us. And there were very few of us on air, but we did definitely share the experiences. But in terms of mentors, I felt I had older reporters in the station who definitely took me under their wing, whether it be in the I team or, the political reporter. Lots and lots of people were really, really great and wanted to see me succeed and really advocated for my success. But maybe just not exactly the right person who could say like, I've charted these particular waters and I can help you through this.
Well, they won't know. They just won't know.
Right.
I mean, that's what people don't get. They just won't understand it. So they have to be open to it. That's what's so crazy about this situation. So what happened moving forward from that incident? Did that sort of color your tenure there?
It made me very aware very quickly.
2 weeks in that happened.
What I was dealing with. And there would be other, examples of stories that I thought were like total gets that would end up just being very difficult. If you didn't stay on these stories and really, really advocate for them, my assignment as a general assignment reporter meant that I was really just at the mercy of what the newsroom wanted to cover, which I get, that's a huge part of the industry. But it meant that I also was very frustrated a lot of the time because I wanted to pitch stories from my community. And that's what I felt was the asset I brought to the station. So you can see it just continued to make, a reporter who was very passionate about my community, got less and less of those assignments. And as they saw that I sort of created trouble every time that I was covering something surrounding immigration, it was like I got those assignments less and less, just because it was sort of a headache. And I think they were choosing to pick their battles, like how dramatic do we want this day to be, I guess. There was a point where me and Sonia, who I wrote about, and partnered with in the piece, were in the room one day during a morning meeting, and there was a rally outside of an ICE detention center. And the people assigned to it were two male white photographer and reporter. And Sonia and I were just looking at each other like, why is one of us not on this story? Sort of like the managers were making a decision to keep our bias out of it before the bias had even shown itself.
So, okay, you were one of 3 Latinas that eventually did not get their contracts renewed at KUSA. And then this brought about quite a bit of backlash from the community. And National Hispanic Journalists Association got involved in this as well. They had meetings with the brass there in Denver and called for the firing of people on the management side and all of these things. So first of all, were the other 2 Latinas, and tell me their names, and they were there before you, or were you guys all during this
Kristen
time?
Aguirre and Sonia Gutierrez, they were there while I was there. They had both been there before me, I want to say. Sonia was there maybe a year on her contract at the point that I entered the door on a 2-year contract. And Kristen may have been about the same. I'm not entirely sure what her full course was that she was there at 9, but I know they were both there well before me.
And had they warned you at all? And this is what you're coming into, by the way.
Yeah, I wondered so many times when I was at the station why no one had warned me, and I was angry about that a lot. I understand now how much easier it is to chalk it up to just a rough experience and keep it moving. Once you get out the doors, you sort of breathe in fresh air and you can care less than when you're in it. So I have a lot more grace for the people who didn't say. But I did wonder that a lot. Where were the people who could have told me what to expect and how to better prepare myself for this? But at the time when I was signing a contract, I also didn't know to ask.
Yeah, but what you don't realize is we all carry a certain level of trauma when you're in there by yourself, right? And so it's really hard to reach out. And, so in my career, I had no one, right? So you look back and you say it would have been great, but you understand, but you just make it right for people that you're going to encounter. But I'm glad you don't hold it against them, because it really is the system. It's sort of Hunger Games, right? It's crazy.
Totally.
Well, you're trying to do the job. You're trying to hang in there, and you're starting to think about, okay, is this the right career choice, or am I in the wrong place? Is there something wrong with me? And
Absolutely.
all of these things, believe me, because I have been there. And
Enrique, this sounds like you've been in a similar situation before.
I have been there. Yes, I have been there. And really, it played just took a toll on me mentally and physically, because
it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard not to feel like it's personal,
right?
And it's hard not to see where there are just some cultural differences, some misunderstanding of each other, of how we work, of how we talk, of how we'd like to do things. There is just a misunderstanding. If you have no one in power who looks like you, then you're also lacking that same sort of shared mindset almost, or at least like similar understanding of each other. And without that, you really do start to look at yourself and think it's a me issue. And why would you want to share that in case it is? Then you're just the one who doesn't do the job well.
Yeah, and it can do hell with your confidence as well.
Totally.
The whole thing. So let's talk a bit about just what other things did you run into? I understand they even talked to you about how you kept your hair.
Yeah, that happened a couple months in. Wore my hair in a middle part like this, with a bun. Wore my hair like that. It's a easy hairstyle that I'm very familiar with. I like on myself, and I wear it with hoops, and I, bring my sass and without that much effort. And they have had, I believe, a stylist type of, image consultants who would help with your look. And for the most part, the things that she contributed to me and to my look, and it was all an upgrade for sure. Except for one day in the station, I was told, you can't wear your hair like that anymore. And I was like, I don't have to wear it like this all the time, but I wear my hair like this. I'm gonna wear my hair like this sometimes. She's like, oh no, the higher ups, it's not a good look. You really shouldn't wear it anymore. And I just said, have you ever just a Mexican girl before? Your style, Mexican girl. We wear our hair like this.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna wear it like this every day, but I'm gonna wear it like this. And I think I probably wore it like that a little too much after, just to, wear it like that. So I could have relaxed in that regard. But it was another just glaring example of a total disconnect between what I was doing in my life with my style and my stories and the way that I spoke and the way that I wanted to do the job, and the things that were important or shining a light on the ways I was different from the other reporters.
I guess I would have asked them, have you ever heard of Frida Kahlo? You know, because I mean, though your hair wasn't exactly like that, but it was in kind of the bun, you know, which I've seen among Mexican women a lot, and looks quite stylish, I think. But
Yeah.
I'm that. I guess what baffles me in hearing of your story and the of what happened also to the other two Latinas, one of which actually suffered a stroke,
Yeah.
and then she wasn't able to regain her job. Is that right? Is
Yeah.
that right?
She had a stroke, was in recovery, was able to teach herself to eat, walk, and talk again. Was sort of put on a probationary period at the station. And then before her, I want to say about 6 months before her contract was actually up, she was released.
Hmm.
Wow. Well, I guess what baffles me about this is that we're not talking about 1980 or
No, we are not.
1970 or 1980 or 1990. Uh, we're talking about 2018, 19. I mean, that's what baffles me for one thing, and but I also think it says not a lot about the management and if you want diversity and you want that also because you know that your coverage area has a lot of people that are Latino, that you want to cover that community, particularly in a time when there's immigration and all these other things going on, that you don't hire the people that could bring you the good coverage for that, and also groom them so that you know that they're going to succeed. That's the biggest problem I've had is just the I think in news especially because it's such a grind is just seeing this bringing young folks in and letting them just sink or swim, and that for me is a real issue. So I don't know.
It's interesting too because it begs the question: do you make hires like me
Right.
because you genuinely want to have better coverage, more in-depth coverage, more honest, personal coverage, more consistent coverage of in my case, Latino community, other cases, a Black community or an Indigenous community, the Asian American community, any other community, the LGBTQ? Do you make hires like that because you genuinely want to have better coverage of those communities? Or are you making those hires because you're the impression that you have to meet a quota in your hiring every year or so? And
Well,
I think
the answer is both, right? And it depends on the market you're in and what the demands are. So, one of the part of the story was the whole idea of them having you put out what your immigration status was, or your families, or I mean, that you had to make your personal story part of the story. What was that about?
so that was actually Sonia
Oh,
Gutierrez, and
Okay.
she was, to see it from the lens of Sonia and then Kristen, who had the stroke. Theirs were the stories that I was very afraid that if I didn't say something, they wouldn't ever either. And their time was passing quickly. By the time I got let go, Kristen had been gone a year. By the time I got let go, Sonia had been already gone almost 6 months, 5 months, something like that. And while it was for me easy to see that they had bad experiences that just not only affected them, but also affected the communities that they so desperately wanted to cover. I knew that I needed to say something for me and for all the journalists coming behind me and for the communities of Denver and of Colorado. But I also really, really knew that these were stories in terms of Kristen and Sonia that needed to be highlighted. Because, I mean, exactly as you said, Matt, Sonia being asked to disclose her status was a stipulation that was put on her in order to create a level of transparency, and to make sure that I guess that people knew where she was coming from when speaking about this, immigrant community. But she fought that for sure, and ultimately, what it effectively did, was discourage a really perfect person who should be covering that community from covering that community.
why did they do that? I mean, what was the rationale?
Good question. There are so many things that I could ask that question about.
I would
No,
have asked her to do a
don't know.
story about that,
And I
about
think
the
they
fact
did.
that,
I think that they did. They had her speak about her status and her journey at times. So it was it was odd the ways that it was used against us, and then also like for the station
right.
to show its diversity at the same time. So we were like receiving a lot of like whiplash, I guess. Like we felt gaslit a lot because there were times where
Right.
it was working, and then times where the very same thing was also just not working. And I'm not here to purport that I was a perfect reporter by any stretch. Young reporter, still learning, came to Denver to learn. You know, very, very much would never ever claim that I was perfect. But I wish that I had been, and I wish Sonia and Kristen had been invested in so that we could be successful and so that we could have the tenure of some of our other white counterparts who were doing so well there. The pressure to work under the stipulations that we were being asked to work under make the job really hard. And I've heard people say, you know, you make an experience what you make it. You know, it is what you make it.
What were you told when you were told you were not going to be renewed?
It was a very short conversation, but we had lots of conversations leading up to that. So they sort of felt like they had done their due diligence. I mean, it was really, really short. On my phone, it registered as like a minute. And it was, you know, for all the reasons we've talked about, you know, you won't be renewed. Yeah, I remember the last week of 2020, I had gotten an exclusive with the governor about COVID and had done, you know, some other like vaccine stories in the community, Hispanic Latino community about vaccine equity, and was just doing really work that I was really proud of, talking about the disparities of who was getting vaccinated, who was getting access to the vaccine, what the hesitations were, all of those things. And I then got that call about not getting renewed. And I just sort of remember thinking like, I really couldn't have done anything else, could I? Because I'm doing the work, but I think I've sealed my fate a long time ago. You know, I really couldn't have done anything at this point to avoid this.
Because you questioned and you pushed back. So, you know, that put you on the bad list, I guess, right?
Yeah, it was like more trouble than it was worth, you know?
Right.
So who were all of you replaced by?
So they definitely did hire more Latinas within the newsroom, you know, a few other Latina reporters. I mean, it's clear that there is a quota to be met. I was called by older, more tenured reporters at other stations who looked a lot like me or a lot like Kristen or Sonia, who were inquiring about, you know, I'm getting offered a job. I want to know what it's really like there. And I was like, every time I spoke to another Latino who was about to get hired, absolutely, so glad you called me. Wish I had done this. Didn't know to seek out another Latina at the station. Just know, you know, if you want to talk about your community in depth and often, you should get it written into your contract that that's going to be something that you'll be able to do. Talk about verbiage because some of it is going to potentially be difficult for you. Things like that, just giving them a heads up about there are going to be some things that are just tough to handle as a Latino reporter here, and try to set yourself up for success if you do choose to come here, because I think you'll learn a lot, but you're also going to fight a lot of battles.
And what was their reaction when you told them that?
Many were not surprised, because they were either fighting those same battles at the stations they were coming from, or, you know, had heard from other reporters having been in the industry longer that had come out of 9 News, who had rather come out of 9 News, who had shared that things had been tough for them as a person of color and a journalist of color in Denver. But I mean, a lot of them were really just grateful for the heads up to sort of make a better decision, a more comprehensive yes or no, you know, decision based on somebody else's experience.
Looking back, do you think you had kind of rose-colored glasses when you say, "Hey, I'm going to KUSA in Denver, and it's a big station, and I'm coming from Bakersfield, and I'm making this big leap," that maybe that clouded, or you got swept up in that and not thinking that you would run into issues as you did?
I definitely was looking at it through rose-colored glasses, but I didn't have another experience. So I didn't really know to be prepared for anything other than what I had gotten. I always looked at what I was bringing to the table as a positive Like the passion had never been used in an ugly way. The closeness to the stories had never been used against me. I wasn't ever an issue. All of the things I was bringing to the table were not problems. So I didn't know to ask those questions. I hadn't had an experience like the one I've had, and I know better. I'll be a better job seeker.
But I guess what I'm asking,
based on that experience.
Yeah, I'm asking too, is that do you think that you were thinking, okay, our society has progressed enough that I shouldn't be concerned about that going into this job? That, you know, this is a big station. They probably have, hopefully, journalists that understand how we have moved ahead, or hopefully have, or maybe I guess not.
I didn't. I hadn't quite yet had the experience so blatantly that people who are not Latinos, Latinas, immigrants from this community, I hadn't had such bold assertions of knowing my community and being able to tell me how to better do the job when it came to my community. I hadn't had that yet, of someone like asserting that I personally know, but even though I don't know, I know better, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. But I had not had that, so I did not know that would be an issue. I genuinely was. I had another reporter at another station in Denver, when I was explaining some of the stuff that was happening prior to my contract ending, asked this same essential question. If you could, like, how could you not know? We're like, you know, you've been living in America this whole time as a Ecuadorian Mexican person. Like, you know, have you never run into this before? I think I've been fortunate in that I'm fairly racially ambiguous at times. I think that works in my favor. But to be honest, just as my experience in this industry, being from these communities, being close to these communities, had, for the 2 years that I was in it, been basically the best thing that I brought to the table. So that's all the context I had. I just thought journalism knew it needed this perspective and our voices and our proximity to these stories. I really was so fortunate to have the experience that I had in that. I knew that news brought a lot of struggles, but this particular thing, I did not know.
Well,
and to be fair, I was, I think, 24 when I signed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know.
Well, I got to applaud you for the courage to stand up and make your story known, because it's tough. It's very tough because of the consequences, right? But people need to know it. And I think it gives people strength to speak up. I mean, Enrique and I, you know, when we went up through this, we experienced this, but you just kind of suck it up because it's a death of 1,000 cuts. Because in our day, you didn't speak up, because if you did, you'd be out of a job.
Yeah.
And now I think people have a right to speak up, but they actually have a duty to speak up. So I applaud you and your courage to do this. I mean, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, because it pisses me off, actually, because it's just like, you know, hey, I went through that a long time ago, and you're telling me it's still going on. Well, you know, that's America also too, but unfortunately, but and again, you know, when we talked to Joyce Taylor, and Joyce is a friend, and she agreed with this, is that how many times have we seen people that have come into operations at a station, either in news or whatever other part, that, you know, you need to do some grooming for whatever you're doing and fitting into that either a program or whatever the news operation might be. And if someone's young, but you want to make sure that you're going to give that opportunity to that person to not only come in and do good work, but to succeed, and think about what it is that you need to help them succeed, and to groom them. And that's what ticks me off, is that you're not providing the adequate coaching, you know, because basically, you know, you're putting someone in a position to fail. And that is just BS.
Because most TV stations skate by, let's face it. They think it's job done, because if you look at the screen, it's a rainbow of faces.
We got Lori Lizarraga.
It's a rainbow of faces.
Yes. Yeah.
But what people don't get, and I've been on the management side for a lot of years, is that systemic change happens behind the camera, because those are the decision makers. And that's where we have to really make sure that people of color are there. And, you know, and I think it's a duty for people that are on air to push that, because the leverage you have is the community that backs you.
Yeah, because
Right.
you're the one in the community as well,
Yeah.
hearing finding the story and hearing what those are. And it's a big difference from somebody sitting in the newsroom making decisions to someone that's being out there having to get the story, bring it back, and make slot. You know,
Yeah.
all of those types of
And
things.
it makes difference in the market too,
Yeah,
because Denver has a large Latino community, right?
right.
But it is a white city. I
Yeah.
mean, as opposed to looking someplace like San Francisco, which responds to the community because it is so diverse,
Right.
you know. And it's been years since I've been working in Dallas, but look at Dallas versus Houston, right? And
Definitely.
the pressure that the community can bring on a station to say we need this covered.
Yeah.
So that's why your voice is so
Right.
important.
So Lori, when you made the decision to write about your experience in Westword, did you have any concern that, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? And after you wrote it and submitted it, and then gets published, what's happened since?
I mean, it was all concern over I should not be doing this. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like,
What did your father say then?
I didn't tell very many people that I was doing it. There was a lot of fear too that, I could face some sort of NDA or something like that if
Right.
it became known that I was gonna, speak out. So I was really, really choosy about who I was speaking to about finally deciding to do something like this. So yeah, I mean, the people who I did seek guidance from as I was approaching that in my contract, though, in the industry, fellow colleagues, people who I'd known, um, all of the advice was a resounding, do not do this. Do not, it's going to seem so much clearer when you're out of there that this is not worth it. This is going to potentially sabotage the future of you being a journalist. And I had a friend who's in the industry, who said, it sounds like if you're going to do this, it sounds like you're really just burnt out and you don't even want to be in the industry. You're kind of throwing up your hand. And I teared up at that, because I just was like, that is just so the opposite of what the case truly is. I love this work so much, and I love our communities enough to sort of die on this hill. That's how much I stand by truth, and that change needs to happen. That is how much I love being a journalist, that I'm willing to sort of throw myself on this sword, because if all it does at the very least is push this ginormous boulder up this very steep hill and encourage potentially somebody else to make a more educated decision before they sign a contract there, or somebody else to share their story, whatever it may be. If that's all it does, it's worth it, because change starts somewhere. And I'm fully aware that people like you, Enrique, and Matt, the things you've gone through and how these experiences sound familiar. I'm aware that my success in this time is built completely on the shoulders of reporters before me, who at a time, not so long ago, could have done exactly what I did and not been met with support, not been met with belief, not been met with trust, not been met with results or change. And I was prepared for that. And I'm just so grateful that in 2021, while it's ghastly that these stories are still out there to be told, that when I did tell mine, I don't seem to have been blacklisted just yet, but I will let you know if anything
Yeah,
in that
please
realm
do. We want to
changes.
know what's going on. I mean,
But I mean, that is
especially,
not what I was met with.
yeah. I mean, you not only is it a story that gets published on Westword, then NPR does a piece with you,
Yeah.
and so that's big stuff to have come out about this. So, what's your future look like now for your career? It sounds like you want to stay in the business.
I love this work. I love how effective it is. If people have encouraged me, potentially look into some sort of, politics, run for an office or something. But I gotta say, journalists can get things done and fast. Politics can take a long time, but I mean, we can shine light in places and affect change in real ways. And it doesn't have to be slow if we're talking about the right things and we're shining light in the right places. And I love getting to do that. I think our community deserves this voice. It's long overdue. And I like being connected to the communities and doing community journalism. So I hope I'm never done with it ever. But in terms of all that I've learned from this piece, what I know now is there are a lot more opportunities, and I think a lot more space for people to, like me, who want to share their experiences about how to better diversify and truly change our newsrooms and just places of work in America from being, places where you just have a colorful group of people who work for you, but aren't empowered at all to use their voices or to be part of the decision-making process. I think, Nine News is a great example of, like you said, we were a colorful group of people, and there were enough of us to make sure that it seemed like there was a lot of representation. But being in a room as a person of color and feeling like you aren't empowered to use your voice, like feeling as if it doesn't matter what you say or do, the coverage that's going to happen is going to be made by your white managers and your white counterparts more often and with more trust than you will ever get. You can have a workplace that is majority people of color, and if they're not being made part of the decision-making process, and if they're not being trusted and used as experts, and their voices are not being empowered, then you just have a colorful workspace, and good for you. But it is about, empowerment. And we say, diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, I don't think inclusion goes far enough. We don't just want to be included. We're in the room.
Yeah, we got to be.
But we need to be empowered, moved up, supported, and made to not really be given an option, but other than to succeed, because these places need us and our communities need us to be there, not just in the room, but empowered to use our voices on their behalf. And so I'm realizing as a product of this piece, which is totally an unexpected outcome, that there is a lot of room for that perspective. And I'm just starting interviews now after 2 full months of doing panels and interviews and podcasts and classes. And it's just been such a beautiful, crazy, crazy season. But I like that I get to be a part of this larger conversation in such a more real way, and not in a way that I feel afraid like I have to share these perspectives. So when looking for a new job, we'll see, where that takes me as I start this interview process. But I do feel more empowered than ever to use my voice and to use these perspectives to really make the industry a better, more empowered place for journalists of color.
I understand that the 3 of you are being honored by the ACLU in Colorado. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
When is that happening?
In October.
Okay.
And it's an award that they don't necessarily give annually, but when they see, an act of journalism that really goes above and beyond in terms of fighting for equal rights and human rights in Denver and in Colorado. So when they called, I really didn't believe that it was real. I'm floored. I'm floored by that kind of praise. I'm floored by the support. I'm truly overwhelmed because I did not expect it. And I am so grateful that it was not, in fact, a sword that I had to fall on, but it really was the start of something really important. And I'm really so grateful to get to be part of this conversation.
Are you staying in touch with the other 2 Latinas that were in the newsroom?
We literally talk every day. If I have not texted or called one of them, we're closer now than we have ever been. And if I have not texted one of them, even for a single day, like a day goes by and I'm like, I hope they're okay. That is, they're to the point as often as I text my sisters, I am texting Sonia and Kristen. We are in a group message. We are on FaceTimes all the time. We have truly gotten so close, and it's been really wonderful to get to be a sort of, a group that faces this together versus, me alone.
You need to get T-shirts made, las más chingonas, the biggest badasses. That's what it is. So, well, congratulations.
We've discussed shirts that may say potentially the Trinity, but those would just be for us. We would.
Yeah. Well, good luck. Stay in touch. Let us know how the journey goes, and let us know too when you land your next job. But because we'd like to know how you're doing, and I hope the other 2 actually I know one that is still working, right? She went to another station.
They both have.
They both have.
Since,
Okay. So
mhm.
they were all right. So you know
Both
that
of
there's life
whom,
after.
when they left, absolutely, when they left, they thought they would be out of the industry,
Right.
and both have since been sucked back into news in some capacity.
Yeah.
So, and I'm happy to hear it, because they're so good at the job, and
Right.
they love our community. So we're lucky to have them.
Well, there's life after KUSA, and hopefully you have and what has happened there will make some changes for the positive. We'll see. Thank you so much for taking the time with us and
Thank
sharing
you,
your
Lori.
story. All right.
Thank you both so
All
much. I
right.
appreciate it. This has been
All right.
great.
Lori Lizarraga, thank you so much. Bye bye.